21. The only amendment I wanted to make to that, I had mentioned a Heritage Month for Native Americans, but what was left off was the mentioning of the Medal of Honor recipients from our Native American service members, and there were 28. It is our nation's highest honor of sacrifice, fidelity to duty, and bravery to our nation and their fellow comrades in arms. So I did want to amend just to add that there were 28 Medal of Honor recipients to that portion of the minutes. Any other comments or about the minutes?
I move approval with that amendment.
Okay, and we have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Sounds unanimous. Okay, the minutes are approved. So the next item was talking about body camera funding. I'll go ahead. Is there going to be a presentation, Kathleen, or do you want to just discuss it?
So what I would recommend, I just wanted to let the council know that if you want to move forward with the public safety sales tax per RCW, that will have to happen in a primary or a general election. And I would actually ask to, based on your guys' decision, may recommend moving this to the December 1st when we have the full council available to have that more in-depth conversation on how the council wants to move forward with the body camera funding conversation.
Okay, well, I'm okay with that. I did want to publicly say, though, I'd kind of like to go back to the drawing board and make sure that those are our only two options other than cutting something else out of the budget. I did talk to our congresswoman who could get this put on the next grant rounds like VPD received. And I know that doesn't add to the sustainability of the program. We obviously have other ARPA funding that, again, doesn't add to the long-term stability of the program. I did also reach out to our sheriff and asked him to reach out to the chiefs so that each city is beginning the process of documenting what their needs may be so that we could pursue the other ballot measure that had been teed up last time as an option. So we do our due diligence in documenting how much revenue or additional tax money each of the cities would receive as part of their 40% share should the public decide to vote for it. So I'm hoping that we could just kind of look fresh, but that's the direction I've been pulling since the election results came back. Anyone object to moving this to the 1st of December?
I have no objection, but I would like to add something if I may.
Please.
I think we should have another estimate on costs from all the various parties the next time that it is brought up. We had good information from Mark Gassaway in particular when we went forward with Prop 10. And I think that there's a chance now for that to be upgraded. I understand that there are times when there can be assistance on the upping of technology as a part of the original agreement at the purchase of body cams. And that I think should be investigated with some of the manufacturers or sales organizations so that we do have, for sure, again, an updated estimate on cost.
Okay, Julie, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I have no problem waiting till next week. You know where I stand on this. I think this is the right measure. I think it's clear for the community, and I think a little outreach to our cities will add to that general support for this measure. So next week or December 1st is fine with me.
Good. So, and that's what was missing the last time. And so I asked the sheriff to begin that process with the chiefs, but I'm wondering if the county manager or Lindsay or someone else could reach staff to staff to make sure they understand what we're looking for as far as, basic numbers, so that we could put it on a ballot measure and have, maybe Camus just announced they're going to fund it. Maybe they've got all the money they need. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But we do need that level of duty to fulfill our fiduciary responsibility to our citizens. All right, so I guess we'll put it over to the 1st of December. New business, Clark County Transportation Alliance policy statement was, I know we received it and we've had discussions with Lindsay. Lindsay, were you going to present something further on it today?
Yes, just as far as the public council time discussion, I know, as you mentioned, I spoke to each of you individually about this, but wanted to bring this forward in council time to see if you would like to approve our kind of endorsement of it, if you will, our support of it. And as you can see here on the screen, it says logos here. So what they do every year is the jurisdictions that are part of this Transportation Alliance, including Clark County, the jurisdictions, the cities, WashDOT, would then be able to put their logo there. It's a typical format that we have for legislative documents in which multiple organizations, multiple parties are supportive of a particular piece of legislation or a particular legislative agenda, that they will then, instead of writing 15 letters of support for something, they put their logo on it. It's a quick way for legislators to know that which entities are supporting a particular item. So that's the way that that works. So they're requesting Clark County to support their policy agenda, and then our logo would go there, and they would be distributing this to our delegation and the relative or the relevant transportation legislators.
So any feedback, questions?
Yes, I do, Mr. Vice Chair.
Please.
If you look on the second page of this document and the second paragraph under the first box, it says, there's 3 lines there. We place high priority on long-range transportation corridor planning. That is the only mention in this document of the emphasis that I feel Clark County Council now has on the 3rd corridor. And I would like to suggest that we place that as a higher priority item, whether it's in a box or not, but not just so inconsequential. I'll be honest with you, the first time I looked over this document, I even missed those lines, and I think other people would too. So that would indicate maybe it's not really that high of a priority, and it needs to be, in my opinion. So I would like to see that take place so that it gets into that legislative mindset more than it is communicated here.
The couple things I will note on that. One, the Transportation Alliance priorities. This is already a rather lengthy wish list. It's one that the legislator would look at and say, well, this is, I mean, for one jurisdiction to even get all of the projects that are on this list is far more than is realistic, particularly going into 2022, which is a supplemental budget year. And their supplemental budgets are a bit like our supplemental budgets, and that it's supposed to be intended for one-time cost things, modifications to the prior budget that need to happen, recognizing revenue that wasn't anticipated. It's not meant for large-scale new budgetary investments. The other thing is all of these are intended to be funding ready projects that have a defined scope, that are ready for legislative funding so that they can enter into construction. So all of the projects that you'll see in terms of, the critical regional projects, our 2 projects on here are the 179th Street projects. I know we've talked about those, but you can see the list here of the projects throughout Clark County. These are all that are ready to help move towards construction. And the last thing I will note is that this isn't our document. We certainly can put on our legislative priority in whatever order and whatever words that we want to use to communicate our priority. But this is intended to be a compromise document amongst all of the jurisdictions. And so We certainly can ask for changes, but we also, I think, need to be prepared that this is intended as a collaborative document that the parties have worked through to say, what can we all agree to put our logo on and show our unified support of, so that we hopefully can have more of an impact to get some of these projects funded.
Councillor Olson, did you have something you wish to add?
Thank you. And I would agree both with Councillor Bowerman and with Lindsay on this. I think, we're just beginning officially our discussions about these additional corridors. And I think the fact that it's on the list is more than I would have anticipated, frankly. So I think at least it's on the list. And then as time goes by, as we start to do our work here in collaboration with the Transportation Alliance, those corridors and the conversation around those corridors will improve and increase in priority. So I would hope that we would add our logo and our support to the plan and continue to advocate for more discussion on future corridors.
So I want to give a little bit of history with this too. So number one, this is great detailed work, specific projects. The RTC pays attention to it, provides funding to some of these projects. And I can't remember if it was at a council meeting or at an RTC meeting where I brought up exactly what Karen Garriman just brought up. It was in last year's statement, but it was so inconsequential as far as it just is buried in the document. I mean, I would like to somehow give the ICC that constant message. This is important. At least they could put it in bold, something that it stands out. So I mean, I know it's not our document. Everything Lindsay said is exactly true. So I want to put our logo on it. I want to support it, but I do want the ICC to get that message, which I delivered to them just myself last year. Can we get at least that line bolded so it stands out to people as we hopefully can move forward on this issue?
So I can certainly, one thing that I could do is to let them know, hey, we're ready to put our logo on this. We know that the legislative bills are going to start dropping here in a couple of weeks. The legislature's in session this week for their committee days. So we can let them know we're ready to put our logo on, but we would request if there is, willingness to make certain changes.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing that we all support it. I mean, I'm not going to hold it hostage. I want to give them our logo. I want to give them our support. Am I hearing differently from anyone? I mean, I don't want to say do this or else we're not going to give you support. I mean, I don't want to cross over that line.
Okay, sounds good. I will let them know.
All right, so Washoe Pit and road dedication.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Jamie Housley and Steve Hornstein did meet with me and members of our PA's office on November 5th, I believe. They're asking to be added to a future council time agenda to talk about Washougal Pit and the road dedication. During our conversation, they also mentioned about an RCW that may provide some provisions on noise compliance, and they were to be sending stuff to our PA's office. We have not received that yet. So I would recommend, if the council wants to permit them to join in a future council time to have this conversation, that it would be after we receive that documentation so that our prosecuting attorney's office can do a thorough review beforehand. I'm not sure if this has happened that often in the past. This is an ongoing negotiation and conversations between the county and these two attorneys. So the request is from them, if you would permit them joining a council time in the future to talk about the Washougal Pit and road dedication.
I think that would be excellent because I believe that they offer a little bit different perspective that is important for the council to hear. So I would support that with the timing that you suggested, Kathleen.
Councilor Olson.
Again, I would agree, as long as they get the information to staff so that everybody's got all the information necessary and we can get it all at the same time, both perspectives if they're different.
And I see Christine Cook's still on. So what I concur, but what I would ask Christine or whatever other lawyers weigh in on this, that as much work ahead of time with these other opinions, these other avenues. I mean, it would be great to have a unified legal opinion from both our constituents and our staff, provided legal support. That probably may not ever happen, but it would be great, really great to fully evaluate what it is they're taking a different position on. So do we have a time frame in mind, Kathleen?
I thought we would have received it by now, because when we ended the meeting, they did say that they were going to be working with staff to get that sent over. I did confirm with Leslie that the two attorneys that were with me have not received it yet. And I agree with you, Councilor Mevigi. We need to have that ahead of time so that we can vet and review that information as well prior to the conversation. But we haven't received anything as of this morning. So hopefully I can reach out to them. I think the PA's office is probably reaching out to them as well, asking for that, but I can certainly do that as well.
And Counselor, I will be happy to pass that along to those in my office.
Okay, so it sounds like we want it, but we want to see what their position is and have our staff and legal counsel fully evaluate. So we at least can narrow the issues if there are differences. Okay, anything further on that topic or?
No, not today. Thank you.
Okay, so the 2.3 is broadband letters of support.
Yeah, and Rebecca or Kristen, if you could pull Porter Ridgefield one first, that'd be great. Thank you. So I'll start with this. We've talked a little bit about a couple of the state broadband grants, but just quick background. So the initial deadline was November, I'm looking at the calendar, November 8th for the initial pre-application deadline. And there were a couple of letters of support that came in at the very last minute. And so Kathleen was able to send an email saying the county understands there's the application, and we're, aware of it and supportive of the application. So there are a couple other entities that have applied that are now asking for a letter of support from the county for the application, the full application deadline, which is November 30th. And we don't have council time next week, so we need to do it at this council time if we're going to send these letters from the full council. So this first one here is a Port of Ridgefield's grant request. Their grant, they have done some broadband expansion work in the past. They have experience doing this, and they aren't asking for a match or anything from the county, no work from the county other than to say, hey, we recognize that some of this work is within Clark County. I mean, all of it is within the county, and that we, are supportive of the Port of Ridgefield and them doing this work to expand rural broadband in the county. I don't have any concerns with this one. I don't see any red flags on this, but want to get your thoughts on it before we send that to them.
Okay, I see one thumbs up. Karen? Okay, yeah, thanks, Lindsay. It's great I'm heartened by these letters going out. Okay. How about
so the second one, Rebecca, Kristen, the second letter, this is the one where I have a little bit more concerns on this one. So this is the letter you see in front of you that they requested. So this is a group called 4C Broadband. There's kind of two facets of it. There's a nonprofit corporation and there's a special purpose corporation. They are teaming up. Certain members of the Middle Class Alliance are working with this 4C Broadband group to expand rural broadband. They're looking to do it's a large project. It would be greater than 100 miles of a network for infrastructure, both kind of the primary trunk lines, if you will, and then also the micro loops that serve individual homes. I know that they have certainly interest in the consumer end of things. What I don't know is whether or not it's really fully baked and ready on the provider and the construction end of things. So when I spoke to them, for example, I know there was mention of, the Kitsap PUD model. Kitsap PUD, to my knowledge, is the only PUD that has engaged in becoming basically an internet service provider, in that they are building out the infrastructure and they're doing that work. There was a recent state law change that allowed local jurisdictions to do that, because previously they were prohibited from doing that. So that, of course, if they were to ask that of Clark County, would be a much more significant ask. That's not what they're asking at this point. At this point, they're asking for a letter of support for their grant application. But what I don't have from them is kind of the full information of what it is that they are looking for from the county. This is the only group that I have spoke to of all of them that cannot fully give me an answer in the question of what are you going to ask for the county throughout your process. All the rest of them will say, hey, we might have some easement issues, but that would be it. Or we're not going to be asking for anything, but the state is asking for a letter of support from the county jurisdiction, so we're asking for that. So that's where I have some worry and some concern. I think it's perfectly fair to send a letter to the state broadband office that says the county council is supportive of expansion of rural broadband. We need it in the county. We are looking forward to any conversations with entities that are wanting to do that work. And we're supportive of, grant investments within Clark County to expand rural broadband, and leave it very non-specific in terms of support for a particular project. So if you want to do a letter of support, that would be my recommendation, something that's a little bit softer, just to make sure that we're protected in terms of any decisions that the council is going to have to make in the future on this one.
Comments, thoughts?
Lindsay, Councilman, yeah, so Lindsay, we would still do the Ridgefield one, and then this would be a separate, broader, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so the only comments I would make, and Lindsay, we had this conversation too. I mean, I want to do everything within our power to attract private partnerships, whether we help with grants, give permitting a priority, help with easements. I mean, we need to have partnerships. We're not going to become a utility. And I kind of sense that's where this is heading. That's more of a, Lyndon Baines Johnson did that really well in Texas and getting electricity out to rural Texas. This is a federal issue for this kind of project, unless the state wants to take it on. But what specifically are you recommending as far as softening this? I mean, I want to keep the momentum going. This is a good initiative, but we're not going to become a county utility. Hopefully our own utilities will get interested, but there are private vendors out there that we want to encourage and help in public-private partnerships, but we're not going to become a utility. So what specifically are you recommending on this letter?
Yeah, so I went ahead and just kind of drafted a very short letter, and I'll go ahead and read it because it won't appear on your screen. Just saying, the Clark County Council supports expansion of broadband access to currently unserved and underserved areas of Clark County. 4C Broadband and their partners aim to build middle-mile fiber optic networks serving Clark County, as well as initial microloops delivering high-speed fiber connectivity to the door. This is intended to provide the infrastructure necessary to enable and catalyze affordable fiber to the home broadband service throughout Clark County. Clark County looks forward to future discussions with 4C Broadband regarding their grant application and proposed work. Broadband access is critical to our business and residents. We fully support Washington State broadband investments to increase rural broadband connectivity in Clark County. And leaving it at that.
Okay, I'm very happy with that. How about the other counselors?
I think that's great.
Okay.
Julie, you
Works
still
for me.
with us? Your screen
I
went
am,
up.
yep. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
yeah, I am. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Anything else, Lindsay? Was there a third letter or not?
Not today. We did have
Okay.
some other requests. We don't have any news on those ones because, like I said, the next application deadline for them is November 30th. But I know they're proceeding forward. I've been in touch with them. there's one that will be requesting kind of an agreement that they need, sort of like a franchise agreement. That's Comcast, and so I'm working with the PA's office on that to make sure we get that by November 30th. But otherwise, the rest are all set to go.
Super. All right. So 2.4, continuum of care.
So on this one, we had talked at the most recent council time that we talked about this, about having a meeting with Council for the Homeless, figuring out more of a skeletal structure, not fully created, but at least a framework, if you will, for what we would be proposing for the Continuum of Care Executive Committee. And so that's what the letter that you see here is. That would be a letter that we would be sending to the City Council saying, we are wanting to look at this Continuum of Care Executive Committee structure. This is what we're thinking at this point. City, would you be willing to meet with the assistance of a facilitator? So wanted to see if you are ready to send this to the city, if you have any changes. The one change I will note when Kate Budd took a look at this is to increase the representatives for the Vancouver Housing Authority from 1 to 2. It's from the last meeting with Councillor Medvedji and Councillor Bowerman. It's my understanding that the discussion was to have it at 1. Her suggestion was to move it to 2 because of the scope of work that they do, the number of projects that they have. So I will note that, but the letter reflects the discussion that you had in the meeting with the Council for the Homeless.
So the only other suggestions I had in skimming through the letter, this is a start. It's to open a dialogue. Maybe if we ended up with someone to facilitate all these details, how many people are on it, who gets to vote. I mean, all that's work to do. So whether it's 2 people from the Vancouver Housing Authority or 1, I mean, it could be 2. I don't want to dig my heels in the sand over that. But I did want to put, basically it's an executive committee on our homeless. I want to get away from the JEG mentioning it. I also want to, get kind of dropped from the name or lessen it as far as continuum of care, because that seems to be a hot button with the city. It's just an executive committee for our homeless. We were going to pause to participate our participation in the JEG until we create this better way forward, a more inclusive of all the stakeholders. That's what we're hoping to create. So I wanted to kind of couch that in a more positive way. And I think in the second paragraph, you had said it hasn't been implemented. I just want to say it hasn't yet been implemented. I mean, this was originally proposed and we're just kind of dusting it off and making it better. So I just want to kind of change that tone a little bit in the letter, but otherwise the letter is good and I would like to see it go out so we can keep forward progress. Councillor Bowerman?
I had reviewed the draft letter yesterday or the day before, and subsequently did a little brainstorming session with Kate Budd, because we know that the verbiage continuum of care was of concern to the city of Vancouver because of its perceived limited approach to dealing with the homelessness issues. So Kate and I brainstormed a bit, and she said there is another community that she said would not mind are using their same name, and she liked it. I liked it. I sent it out to the same group, and Vanessa commented that it was fine with her. But at any rate, that was ECHO, ending community homelessness. And that would be in lieu of continuum of care, that verbiage, and in lieu of the JEG, just to give it a name that we could adopt initially in this letter, subject, of course, to change after the larger group met and discussed the direction they really want to go.
So Karen, you're saying both Vanessa and Kate representing the staff and Council for the Homeless support this rebranding. Is that?
Yes, yes. Kate
Okay,
is the one who suggested it. And I suggested to Kate that maybe she reach out via phone call or email to that group that uses that name and just be sure that they're fine with our using it too. She was sure that they would be. But she felt too that it was a name that gets away from the concerns of the past. And that's
Well,
what we want to do.
I think that's super. So that I would like that in the letter if Councilor Olson agrees as well. I'll be meeting with the mayor, I think in a day or two, and I'll introduce that concept to her.
Ending
in
community
advance of the letter.
homelessness.
I like it. What do you think, Councilor Olson?
Yeah, you know, you both are taking the lead on this, and it sounds good to me at this point. So I'll let you just carry the ball at this point.
I will go ahead and make those changes. Would you like to get the letter out? I don't think this needs to come back. I can make the changes that we've talked about, and then we can get the letter out. Does that sound?
That sounds good. And Lindsay, as you see, the continuum of care is referenced several times. So every time.
Yep, we'll make all those changes.
changed.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay and Karen and Julie. So any councilor reports that anyone would like to discuss? Okay, work session request, Camp Bonneville Master Plan.
Yes, there is one work session request this morning for your consideration. This is from Public Works regarding Camp Bonneville. The staff wish to provide an update on the cleanup work, confirm the master planning strategy with the council, and finalize the advisory committee selection process. And they're asking for this to be in late January 2022, even though it says 2021.
I think we're ready for an update, and I see at least one other thumb up. Two. All right. Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Lindsay, further policy issues?
One thing just to update you on. So of course we have the local redistricting process, but then the state has their redistricting process, and the state redistricting process is for the congressional districts and the legislative districts. So the deadline for the state redistricting commission to approve their maps was midnight as of Monday, November 15th. There was a 5-hour meeting of the redistricting commission. They failed to meet the midnight deadline. But the next morning they continued to work and they did submit maps. So I will email those to you. Technically and fully legally, it now goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not have to give any deference to these final maps that the state redistricting commissioners put forward. So the state Supreme Court will adopt the final maps and may be vastly different from what the redistricting commission finally put together. It may look similar. So like I said, I will send it out to you. The redistricting commission, what they put together would be a substantial change for our legislative districts. The 49th would continue further east than it currently does. The 17th district would be all of Skamania County, plus would include Camas, Washougal, and some areas north of that. The 18th district would become basically Philida, Salmon Creek battleground, and the 20th district would come considerably south into Clark County to include La Center and Ridgefield. Yakult, Amboy, and those areas to the north, in the north of the county. So like I said, I will send you the map so you can take a look at that. But technically it's now up to the state Supreme Court.
Well, thanks for that update. And so that's kind of what I gleaned from the earlier news reports, that they actually had voted before midnight, but they hadn't finalized the maps yet. And so they didn't meet the deadline, but the maps are now finalized. They continued their work even though they missed their deadline. So
Correct.
That's okay.
Yeah, so they voted on it, but because staff I mean, because of all of the data input that would need to go into place to make all of those changes, the maps weren't prepared. And because the maps weren't finalized, the vote that they took wasn't on any sort of final map because they hadn't been created yet. So I know staff was running around doing the best they can in the midst of a meeting. But yeah, they met for quite some time and didn't quite meet the midnight deadline. So.
Yeah, so that's kind of sad that there was no flexibility because of all the data being so late because of the pandemic. We're going to run into that locally as well. You know, there's just too much time pressure. It's just sad they didn't let it play out. Give them one more day to get the data inputted before it had to go to the Supreme Court. Anyway, that is what the law is.
I know that they've spoken. It would require a constitutional amendment to the state constitution to change that, and that may come forward on our ballot next year. The legislature would have to vote to then send the constitutional amendment to the ballot. So we may see this issue come up, but your sentiments are, you're not alone in that. There's many people expressing the same thing.
So anything further before we jump into our executive session? And all
That's it for me. Thank you.
And
anything from either counselor, manager?
I would just like to add, ask the council to add one more executive session item for 5 minutes for collective bargaining.
Okay, so we have a total of 4. One pending litigation under RCW 4230 110 1I for 10 minutes. A second under the same section for 10 minutes. Potential litigation with sub-I for 5 minutes. And then one for collective bargaining. And you said 5 minutes?
Correct. And there is potential action.
Okay, so potential action, and the lawyers will be participating, and we'll be back in about 30 minutes or so.
Councilor Livergy?
Please.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Leslie Lopez. I just wanted to indicate that when we go into executive session, we need to set a time that you're coming back. So if it's 30 minutes, I would suggest stating that we'll be back at 11 o'clock with potential after action.
Okay, and hopefully that's not too optimistic. So we'll say we'll be back at 11. Okay, let's close this out and go into our executive session. Well, go ahead and do a slow opening so we don't violate any meeting laws.
Yep, it's 11 o'clock. You're on.
All right, so we're back from executive session. We're resuming our council time. I move to approve the proposed settlement agreement and release of all claims relating to the lawsuit entitled Dolores Becker versus Clark County, and authorize the county manager to sign the agreement on behalf of the county.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any further business? Otherwise, we'll end council time. Take care, everyone. Have a safe day.